with things that we are fabricating. So in this case, while the team was still gluing 80,000 sugar cubes together, we already started trying to map things and get it to work hand in hand, side by side, to make sure that everything is working fine.
Yeah, so because we work in the physical space, there's obviously some laws that we can't escape, like physics, which you would never think about when you're building a website or a mobile app. You can build this really nice enclosure for an electronics project, and then maybe someone will drop it and it will end up completely destroyed. Or even more strange and invisible things, like in this project for Red Bull, there was a big subwoofer inside of this box, and there were also the different sensors, and these super low frequencies were affecting the electronics in a way that was completely messing up with the sensing, and it took us forever to understand what was going on there. But it was useful, because actually a few months later we had this other project. It was a Kinect project. We were trying to detect people's skeletons, and it was on top of this platform, and again, we had these big speakers that are making the whole platform vibrate, and the Kinect doesn't detect anything, but on your screens you don't see it because it's such a fast vibration. But we were able to solve it faster.
Just turn the music down.
Yeah. Sometimes even like iPhones, which cost a ton of money and you would think they work perfectly, don't agree when you're trying to find out where the north is. Or simple things like light bulbs can suddenly burn out or explode, and maybe you're out in upstate New York and you don't have any shop around that you can get a replacement. So yeah, that happens a lot. We are out in the wild in all kinds of natural environments. Sometimes it can be the mountains, or it can be the middle of Times Square. And in this case, for this project for Android, it so happened that the Ferguson protest was just there, and all the police was around, and we had to close earlier. Or again, for the same project, we needed the Kinect to be not exposed to direct sunlight. So we kind of calculated, we did the math, and we were like, okay, at 4 p.m. we'll be fine. But then it turns out that there's a skyscraper in there that's reflecting all the sunlight and completely... Or many times we were promised dark tents so that we could project inside. And that's not possible during the day. The sun is going to leak somehow. There's actually a projection in there that you can't probably even see.
And then you have to come up with creative fixes. In this case, we pulled black plastic bags all around the tent to make it darker. And then the last thing, that you don't really think about until you come there is when the people come. And the ideas that you have for them to do is maybe not always what they want to do. So they come up with the craziest acrobatics to jump on the bear. Or sometimes when you want them to smile. I mean... in this case, we built this really nice box in the middle of all this electronics, put everything in there that it's nice and hidden and clean. And for us, it was a nice, technology box. For somebody else, this seemed to be a nice stage to dance on. Yeah. You see that at the footprints the next morning. And we built this tennis rackets and added electronics to it, and we thought we had something nice looking, really cool that's going to work, and we can detect swings with it. We brought this to the installation. First day was Kids Day. Kids are the virus to every installation. Look how he's nicely smashing this on the floor. Boom! And then there falls the sensor. After this night, or during that night after, we had to fix every single tennis racket we built for the first opening day for the adults. So The funny thing with this is there's no instruction manual to how you build these things. So we have to consistently come up with new technologies we use, with things we combine in new ways. And it's just because, like we're doing this the first time. You can't read up on it. And there's a lot of trial and error to make these things work. But at the same time, like the more and more we do of this, we just learn and try to like make not the same mistake the same time. So now we're gonna just take you through 2 projects that we've done. One is more on the physical side, one is more on the digital side, and kind of like show you how we handle problems that we actually invent in the first place. So the first project was for a company called Bombas Socks. An old friend of ours was involved with that. He started the company, and they actually went on Shark Tank and pitched this, and they got funded by one of the guys, and he's going to explain quickly what Bombas Socks is.
I've been in this clothing business for many years, and the last thing I would ever sell in my life would be socks. These guys walk on, and his name is Randy and another guy named David. They're selling these socks named Bombas Socks, online only. And whenever you buy a pair, they donate a pair to the homeless shelter. Working with these guys, there's a social cause that's really fulfilling, but they're also showing me an entire new way of doing business.
So their thing is, they found out that homeless shelters really need underwear and socks because that's the only thing that does not get donated. So I guess no one of you might have ever donated socks because you wear them until you throw them away. That's what they used to like start their company, and he really liked it. So it was all about kind of like doing good things. Gap got interested in this and started working with them together, started selling their socks, and for Thanksgiving last year, they gave them a full window in the Gap flagship store on 5th Avenue, and they wanted to just do something really fun there and approached us to come up with an idea with them. So we came up with this idea of a good deed machine. We really just like wanted to build a machine that helped you to do nice things kind of like before Thanksgiving and Christmas. The idea was that people online on their website could submit a good deed like open someone the door or call your mom and say, I love you. Or, like really simple, small things that can make someone's life a little bit nicer. And so this machine was supposed to be in the storefront, and you can put your hand on the window, and it would kind of like give you one of the good deeds, and then this starts moving and counts up the number, so in the end we can see how many good deeds came out of this. What looked really cool when you see the design and the 3D turned into this. And we started, to like think about what we needed. We had multiple components. Some of them were just mirrored, which is really nice when you do it digitally because you can just like copy paste it. When you now want to build this machine, copy paste is not a good idea. So for this one, we needed, in the end, 2 Arduinos. We had 7 DC motors, 3 steppers, 2 power supplies, 2 sensors. And we don't have a lot of experience in actually building machines. So we just jumped right into this and started prototyping everything.
Yeah, so for this project, there wasn't a huge budget, so we kind of want to make everything in-house. And like Daniel said, we're not very experienced, but in a way, the machine, it's like a way of animating what we animated always in digital, but in the physical world. So it's very interesting for us. We start by looking online, of course, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. The counterpart of the machine that you saw, we were lucky to find these nice CAD files. For other parts where we wanted linear movement or circular movement, we went to even more basic resources, like these 8th grade wooden toys. What this allows us to do is to get really quickly to a simple working prototype that maybe it's really ugly and it's not the final size, but it allows us to get to see where the friction is and where the points of pressure will be, and eventually turn it into a nice final piece. For other parts of the machine, we did even more, in a more homemade kind of way.
All right.
Sorry.
All right, rolling.
These are the prototypes we send to clients too.
Yeah, so it's a very simple thing. Actually helped us see that the cam pieces we were using were really long and not creating a very smooth motion. So for the next version, we changed it for these eccentric circles, and they work really nicely, a lot smoother. And eventually, we got this nice organic motion. It looks kind of janky, but that makes it more charming, I guess. And we also realized that maybe we should have left some of these parts, some of the gears open or visible, because they are often as interesting as the visible part that we have here. Another part of the machine was this kind of spinning column. We got that from the fabricator. Obviously, it wasn't right, but after some sanding and painting, it turned out really nice. So this might seem very obvious, but it's something we keep in mind for every installation, and both physical and in software. And you, like Daniel said, you just have usually like 1 night or 2 days to build everything on site. So when you have an installation with this crazy amount of pieces, you don't want to take everything apart, like if it's a Lego or something, and go to the Gap store and rebuild everything. And this was our office during that time. It was a big chaos. But you can kind of see that there are some different modules, like there's a counter on the left and like a conveyor belt on the lower part. So we eventually get it all built in the office. It looks nice, and some parts are like this counter we can take in and out without getting all the gears apart, which is perfect for the construction day. We can just take it there and put it back in. So while all of that is happening, we are at the same time building what would be the core interaction. That part we're a bit more comfortable with. We're used to sensors, and in this case in particular, I knew that capacitive touch was like the way to go, because I had seen different successful projects with it. Plus, it has like this very magical feeling that you're not touching any sensor, actually, because everything is on the other side of the glass. So we started prototyping right away. This one is just a simple copper plate. And the principle, if you don't know this technology, is the same as what you have on your iPhone screen. It's just a completed circuit that's going through this big metal plate. And when you get close to it, you kind of interfere with it, and the electricity takes longer to complete the circuit, and you can measure that and see how close someone is. So we had it installed at the office for an entire week. It was working perfectly. Everything is behind the glass. I'm not really touching anything, just putting my hand softly on the glass, and the reaction time is great. And we were lucky that we were able to go to the storefront and actually test everything. And guess what? It didn't work. It just didn't recognize anything. As soon as the sensor touched the glass, the data makes no sense. We tried different wire lengths, different sensitivity settings. Nothing worked. So yeah, be careful with high security glass. And actually, it actually makes sense, because it has like this really invisible thin layers of silver and other metals, and we think that's what was confusing the sensor.
They have this glass in Fifth Avenue so that because of the temperature and security, and it's just, I guess, Fifth Avenue storefronts are very different from small little towns.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we're back to the drawing board, and we only have like 1 week left. And we're brainstorming, and then we remembered that there's this digital like laser tape measure that we brought every time we went there to kind of get the right distances. And this actually worked through the glass. We were able to measure things from the other side of the window. So there had to be some sensor that was like this, right? We eventually found the LiDAR sensor. That was really awesome. The way it works is very simple. It's like the laser measure. It just sends a laser pulse and kind of measures how long it takes to get back to the camera. Again, we set it in the office. We tested for the last week. It's working perfectly. It has a huge range. Like, we can point it out of the window and almost measure the site to the other building across the street. So we're super pumped that we found this plan B. And it comes to the installation night. Okay. So yeah, after the installation night, panic. The sensors weren't working. They weren't stable enough. They kept disconnecting. I don't know what happened. Like, maybe we messed up with the electronics inside of the sensors when we tried to build these nice cases around it. It was a mess. Like, it was 9 a.m. in the morning, the store was opening, and that wasn't reliable. Yeah. So again, keep calm, try to find another solution. We have to make this work. Luckily, every time we went to this site visit to the stores, we tested multiple things, not just the sensor. We actually thought that it worked. We brought this old webcam we had in the office, and we took these pictures just to get an idea of what a webcam would see. So on the left, you have daylight, people passing by, and someone putting their hand against the glass. Same thing for the right, but during the night. So we didn't have any code for this. We never tried it. We just took this picture with a photo booth in Mac. But just by looking at this, we knew that there was a way to detect people with a webcam. Like, there's a clear difference between those pictures. The top ones have a lot of noise, a lot of different colors and things going on, and the ones in the bottom are even kind of almost the same color, kind of bright. So yeah, we just had to look for those variables, basically, brightness and how even was the image. And in one night, we coded this computer vision algorithm that finally allowed us to have a webcam in there and working reliably for 2 weeks, which was really awesome. So yeah, sometimes you need a plan C as well. And maybe you're very excited, and that happens a lot, about some new technology and something that's very trendy or that you really want to try. But even if that's working, that doesn't mean that you have to stop testing the other stuff. Like, you always have to keep your options open and keep something else in mind, just in case. Eventually, it'll turn out really well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the other project that we wanted to show you started, like many other projects, with a phone call. Do you guys want to do something with swords? Of course. We tried to think something up. We came up with the idea that you would take the sword, you go up on stage, there will different targets show up on the screen, you hit the targets, Game of Thrones inspired artwork is going to spill out and it creates a portrait of yourself. We pitched this to the client. They really liked the idea. They thought of it as like the Fruit Ninja on steroids. And what was really important here was that they really wanted to have a really big, immersive feel to it. So we had to bring it up on stage, and they asked us multiple times to like not only have one person going through, but multiple, because Game of Thrones isn't any new show, and they've done a couple of installations at South by and Comic-Con, and they were expecting long lines of fans, of hardcore fans that just want to go through this. And so from the beginning, it was super important to them that we made sure that everyone goes through really quickly without any hiccups, so that we can just like get as many people through this as possible. Just a little bit of pressure, you know? So we send them this. I'm like, this is really easy. You just take a picture, then you go up on stage, you do the sword game, and then you step down and share your image. Really simple. Until we started thinking about what it actually needs to make this. So that means we need the camera, we need the computer with a kind of like a photo booth that creates exactly the image that we needed. We actually need something in between that helps us to control the flow, where all the pictures that we create, you can pick them, you can like talk to the people, you can send them to the right screen on the stage. Then the next thing is we of course need an application that builds everything, that connects to the swords. We need something that they can use to share it. We need to connect all the 3 swords, and then we wanted to have an immersive environment needs sound. So we needed sound per player and then an ambient sound. And in the end, we had all of these different things, and we needed to figure out what technologies we're using for all of this. We could have maybe used things that exist already, but because everything had to work together flawlessly to get everyone through it, it was kind of like important to us that we have control over every single step. And so out of this like 3-step, really quick user flow became a fairly complex system that we had to build. And for the photo booth, we've done this before. We use Cinder a lot, and it seemed kind of like the right technology to like keep using this. The main application that creates all the graphics, we're using Cinder. And this is kind of like more of a personal preference. We've worked with that for a long time. It's a creative code framework. And you could probably build this in open frameworks or maybe Unity or something, but this is just something that we feel really comfortable with. The remote control, we used an Objective-C app because it was just like the easiest. And to share it, it was just like a simple local web page. Not to forget is that we had to like connect everything together, and it seemed the easiest to just like have a local server that runs Apache and PHP and just kind of like serves the images back and forth. So like looking at this whole massive thing, it was really important to us that really early we hit every single of these modules in a really simple stage with a prototype that just made sure we can do every single thing. So like it was important to just like see it working, even if it's not defined and not really nice looking. It needed to be able to do it. And so we started going through these different prototypes.
Yeah, so again, like in the previous project, we start with something very simple, but this time it's software. So we look at the first thing, the picture we take from the camera. We've built a lot of photo booths before, so that was no problem, having your application talking to the Canon camera. But in this case, we need to get the lighting right. We need to get the right amount of contrast and brightness, so that that's easy to use, and like the different brand ambassadors that are going to manage this section are comfortable with the app, and they kind of get the consistent results. So once we get the pictures working, we make this other app where we can test all the masking and try the pictures from different angles, both with these 2D images that we had as a design, or with the beginnings of a very simple 3D scene that would eventually become our main graphics engine. At the same time, we are also exploring these alternative ways, same with it in Bombus, like keep your options open and try different effects for rebuilding the portrait in case we need some change at some point. For the interaction, that was the other big important part of the game experience. We use these small activity sensors. They are Bluetooth, and inside of them there's an accelerometer, a gyro, and a magnetometer. It was the first time we used them, but we used a little brother from the same company that's a bit simpler before. So we kind of knew we had that as a backup. And also, if you remember the tennis project where we had this nice acrylic box with the sensors outside of the rackets, and then they all got destroyed, this time we knew that we had to place everything inside of the actual sword, inside of the wood, secure, make sure that that's unbreakable. And that also helps a lot in hiding the technology and having people focus on the experience and not trying to understand how it works, or I don't know. So now that we have the sensor, we need to make sure that we can detect the swing. It's not just turning it on from the beginning. It's about knowing when someone is actually swinging or when they are just holding the sword in their hand. And once we detect it, start testing how we can visualize, how we can leave traces on the screen to get a feeling of how cool is it to have a sword, like a physical sword in your hand, and see it exactly the same on the screen. At the same time, we're exploring these targets that we mentioned, just to get timings for the animation, if they should explode in smaller or bigger targets, smaller, bigger pieces, and kind of start defining what would be the gameplay. You can see here that we start creating these mechanics where you have a set time to hit the target, and if you don't get it within those 2 seconds, it explodes again and reforms somewhere else on the screen. And again, when we bring those two things together, we still don't have the graphics that we're going to place in the scene, but we can start using these simple geometric placeholders just to put some content in there that will eventually reveal the portrait. With all of these, all these small prototypes, when we bring them together, we get to this kind of basic alpha version of the experience, which is rough, but the gameplay is almost what would be the end thing. It's already super fun, and it's the first time we actually test at a scale that is similar to the final one, which is extremely important, because when you're in your computer screen, you don't really know if something is fast, slow, big. You actually need to test at scale as soon as possible.
What's also nice is when you have this fairly early in the process, this is always something that you can fall back on. So even from when you run out of time or something goes wrong, if you have this working in the beginning, it can't be worse than this, which is a really nice feeling. So from this point, we can just add detail and finesse to it. So while we were trying to figure out all the technology, designers pulled together the designs of it in the different design parts. And because this is Game of Thrones, we were looking at raven feathers and dragonstone and wolf hair, swords, of course. And not everything has to be code all the time. So we always try to do a nice mixture of both, where things that are easier to animate in After Effects, we just do that and then take the small pieces and then make the composition together with code. Once we have that, next we're going to show a kind of the beta version of everything, where we added more of the user flow, we added all of the different designs together, and we added sound. Everything came together nicely here. We also had the application built for the remote control at this time. and the generated artwork was saved out, and we were able to already share it. So we felt really comfortable at that point to go to Austin and install this for the first time ever. This was the setup. So there was a big team working on this. We are always just like part of a bigger team. We don't throw the actual events. Other people do this. We just come there and bring all the technology and like set everything up together. So like in this case, the screen was on the right side. The photo booth was in the back of it, and to the left, kind of like on a little balcony here, we had all the computers. And from up there, we could like see everything nicely, and like we're able to like watch the people. And this is kind of like a picture from what it looked just before the opening. And of course, we tested it every day. So this is me testing it. It looked awesome. Everything was working. We felt super comfortable. And we thought, yes, we're ready, totally ready for this. And then we opened the doors. And they weren't saying too much when they said there are going to be long lines. They wrapped almost all around the block. People came in, and like they even like people tweeted they camped out. I think at 5 o'clock in the morning to like be some of the first ones in there. And I think by like sometimes 9, 10, it opened at 11. But 9, 10, it was just like the line was so long that they cut the line and said no one can get in after this, which is. It's pretty crazy when you think that your thing has to work for every single person because they waited for 5 hours in line, and they don't just want to, be disappointed with everything. So this was in the space. Photo booth was working really great. The docents did a great job, and that worked fairly flawlessly. So that was good. Next thing was the iPad app. They could pick out who's going to come next on the stage. This was great because like somebody dropped out, somebody wanted to do it again. They could start and stop it or reset it. So like this really helped in like keeping everything moving. And then of course like we had the people doing it, and they were awesome. They had a ton of fun. Everything was working great. Until we saw like a little bit of hiccups, and it's things that we just like we didn't think of it at all. So part of the idea of like having people in line waiting is that we want to like lead them in a way that they can see the installation while it's happening. So like in the end, we don't need to tell them how it's working; they just can see it. With this one, the problem was that the computers were all to the right to the left, and all to the right to the other side, on the right side, were the swords, and they were connected wirelessly. So all of a sudden, there were 200 people in the space that all had mobile phones and like wireless connections and whatnot, and the swords just dropped out in a way that we didn't think of. So we had to think about a solution. And it wasn't immediate, like they were working for a while. So our solution in this was just like, the original plan was to just like switch them out every 2 or 3 hours when the battery was running low. But here we built a monitoring app where we could just see, is everything connected? Are the battery status okay? To kind of like, go in there before something bad happens. So at this point, we felt pretty comfortable, at least from like a technical side, everything was working. But wait, there are people, when you give them a sword, they just don't swing the sword. I know, it's like a magic wand, like something that, which created this problem. That they came out with a portrait that looks like this, and you just can't really tell who it is, and it's a real bummer, like when waited for so long. Like, this is a total failure. So we had to come back, think of something, and that was our solution.
Yeah, so this case was very interesting because all the hardware was working fine. And there was no bugs or anything, but still we were at this point of like shit almost hitting the fan. And what we realized is that in order to recognize a portrait, you need like the area around the eyes. Everything else doesn't really matter. And because these people don't really have time to practice the game, they go there, they have one try, like 30 seconds. Some of them didn't hit enough targets, and they wouldn't cover this important area of the eyes. So because it was kind of a design problem, we tried to come up with this design solution that it's basically what you're seeing there. There's these two circles in there. We added an attractor zone in the particle system that we have. So every time you hit the targets and like spawn these different elements like feathers or antlers, these attractors slowly drag the particles to that area. And you don't even realize, but after a while, that area is usually covered. And just in case that someone is really, really bad and they just hit one target, we have like an extra chance to spawn elements, like an extra possibility for the first hit to spawn some elements around that area of the eyes. And that way, we were able to get some solid portraits. Some of them were dense, some of them were really sparse, but as long as that area were covered, people could identify their faces. And you can see some of the multiple variations that we got here with frogs, feathers, all kinds of elements in the Game of Thrones universe. What was very interesting is that because we took this to places like Austin and especially San Diego, the Comic-Con, a lot of people was dressed up. Like we had all these guys, and some of them were dressed up as Shredder, or you know who that is?
Do you recognize us?
It's Frodo. So, yeah.
And of course, this happened. Biggest celebrity. So when you know that shit might break, you can prepare for it. And especially what we learned with installation is to prioritize, because there is no moving the deadline. When you do this, like you have to like find a way that like at least the minimum is working when you're there. So it becomes really important that you build modular, right? That you like have this little things and like try to make everything work at the same time. And cover the bases first. Like don't think about all the details. Think really simple, build it really fast, and then optimize later. So when you do this, don't just start with the first one and then you do the second one and the third one. What happens there is like if you run out of time and like the last element doesn't work, you're completely screwed. So like instead we just build it this way that we like add we make sure everything is working and then we add a little bit everywhere. So like we can just like finesse, and if we run out of time, it's not that bad because most of these details that you're adding at the end, you're the only person that knows about them. Have a plan B and a plan C. So if you have a module that you get problems with, when like during a prototype, some things show up that might or might not work, just already start thinking about a second option to either completely, take that out or replace it with something else. It's really important to build flexible. What I mean with that is like, because we come into the location so late, it's really important that we can adjust speeds or timing, or, sometimes people ask like, how long is the experience? And we think in the beginning 30 seconds is a really good time, but maybe it's too short or too long, so we want to be able to adjust this right when we're there. And then the rest is really about testing. Part of that is the prototype in the beginning to like get a proof of concept. And we always like have this setup of like, a final folder where the final application is and the prototypes folders where we just like every single thing that we want to test before, just have this in its own application and make sure it's working. And then it's easier to just take that and add it to the bigger project. Everything. And like bring everyone that you can ask and like give them whatever you're building and like see what they do with it. And if it's something that you have to handle with care in the office, it's going to break the first day. That's what we learned with the tennis rackets. Test on the final hardware as soon as you can, and also like if you have the chance to be like a day in the location before, or 2 or 3, like nothing is really final until everything is set up on the final hardware in the final location. And then in the end, try to monitor everything, so like keep testing while you're there, and have backups for everything, like digital backups, physical backups, whatever can break, have additional cables, additional computers, because you're only there for like a day or 2 or 3 or a week. And so like, you know, if it's not working on that day, your complete work was for nothing. Most important, at the end, don't be scared. There's always a ton of things that can go wrong, but there's also always a creative solution that can fix the problem. And that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.